Hello, HonestShe. I'm Heather.
And I'm Hannah. And we have a very special guest with us today. We have with us Samyra Setrana. We're very excited that she's here to have a very honest and real conversation with all of us today. And we just want to take a moment and be very clear about the purpose of Hello HonestShe. The purpose and the foundation of why this channel was created was to empower women in business and culture, in life, in art, in every healthy area of life, and to be that source of light. And especially in recent events, we wanted to make it extremely clear where Hello HonestShe stands. We 100% support Black people, Black Lives Matter. And on this channel, we really want to make sure that Black women have a voice, and that this channel can be a platform to elevate that voice and to extend that voice. So we're very and extremely thankful for Samyra Setrana's time and the truths and the wisdoms that we're going to hear today. So Samyra, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We're very, very excited. So we'll just get right into it. With everything going on the last few weeks, this is the largest Black Lives movement to date. So how is this affecting you as a Black woman, as a school teacher, a mom? You know, you're raising kids. How is that affecting your family and your livelihood? And what do white people need to know to be effective allies in the long term?
Okay, so that is a lot to process, but for me, I guess every Black Lives Matter march or issue that has come up since Trayvon Martin has impacted us some kind of way. We internally feel that, and we have to revisit the trauma each time. So with this, for every George Floyd or Breonna Taylor or Trayvon Martin, there's a story that hasn't been told. And so for us in the African American community and Black and Brown communities, we experience this daily. And so this is common. For the widespread America, everyone is now seeing it. It's being, you're seeing it in social media, you're seeing it on television. And with that, we have to visit the trauma all the time. You know what I'm saying? So for everyone that's exposed, there's so many more that aren't. And so for me as an educator, I guess my job is to love my children unconditionally. One of the first things I tell them when they come into my classroom, I am your 8-hour mother. Those children sitting next to you, those are your brothers and your sisters. You're gonna have to love them the same way you would your brother or your sister in your own home. And I'm going to treat you as if I would treat my child in my own home. And so I think we talk about race a lot. We talk about really trying to get people to understand each other's humanity. That's one of the first things that we talk about and discuss. The reason they need to see that is that, you know, first of all, this whole idea of race was just developed to separate us. Like Black, it was just developed to separate us. And we are one race, we're human beings. And so when my students understand that, then they're more inclined to defend injustices regardless of how they come or how they're presented to them. And I think one of the greatest things for me to witness is when they do that, when they stand up, when they see something that's wrong and they speak out against it. As a mother, it's a little bit more difficult. I think the first time my son was yelled at because he was standing somewhere, he had to be 3, but they thought he was older. And I couldn't explain that to a 3-year-old, but as a 6-year-old, I had to find a way to have dialogue concerning that. And then as a 12-year-old who's taller than me, I have to say, well, now, you know, you can't wear hoodies when you're walking through the neighborhood, or you can't have your hands in your pockets when you go into a store, or you can't run around like your other friends when we go to Six Flags or we go to amusement park, because other people don't see you as my child. They see you as an adult. They judge you differently. And so even though we're building them up spiritually, we still have to give them kind of a crash course in reality with what we are dealing with in this society. And so that for me is is painful, and it's difficult, you know, to have that conversation with them. One of the things I feel like Caucasian people can do, our white community, is educate themselves. There's so much information that's out there regarding, you know, anti-racism and things like that. But I also think that we neglected to educate white America on the humanity of others. Yeah. And we see it in our history books. We see it in our curriculum. We see it, you know, the absence of it, you know. And one of the things I do in our class is we investigate and we uncover someone new of multiculturally, someone new who we didn't know about, you know, and uncover something great that they did. And that allows all of our kids to see each other's humanity and contributions. And when you can see that someone has contributed to society, then you see their value. Well, unfortunately, when there's absence of these contributions, then our society is communicating that certain people hold more value than others, right? And unless we are willing to acknowledge first, we've been all born into racism, and that's not no fault of our own. Mm-hmm. We've got forefathers that made decisions and choices that have put us all in this predicament. We have to first acknowledge that it is what it is, and then declare that I want a savior. I want to be delivered from this. I want to change from this. I want to move forward. But unless we acknowledge it, just like being born again, you're not going to get the deliverance that you're seeking. And you're going to try to put Band-Aids on it. You're going to try to do different things. You're going to try to cover it up with whatever your vice is, you know, and that's what we've been doing with these legislations and laws and certain things that really just ignored the problem, the root of it, you know. And so I think that's one thing that white America, Black America, all of America really needs to recognize, that we're born into this thing together.
Oh, absolutely. That analogy was so powerful and beautiful. I've not heard anything like that yet. You're absolutely right. We've got to acknowledge that and our need for a savior, and to accept that, to move forward. And we've got to do that, as I think every individual needs to make that decision. Switching gears a little bit, you've done a lot in your career. You've done all sorts of different things. At any point in your life or career, have you ever felt forced to, or had the extra pressure on yourself to prove yourself harder than any other candidate or companion, coworker, or even a competitor at any point?
Well, I think it's common for people of color to have stories like this. For me, I would say I have been fighting all of my life. I think I think that the earliest memory I have would be in third grade. I remember transferring from one school to the other. In the particular school that I was previously at, we were a language-focused school, and my reading scores were really high. They were off the charts. However, math was not a focus, and so I was weak in math. And I remember going to this other school, and math was their focus. And so, anyway, long story short, my mom gets me a tutor. The tutor speaks my language. I'm doing well. I go to class, and it was so instant with the tutor, because she spoke my language. She used music. She used art, and it drew me in. And my grades turned around instantly, like within weeks. And my third grade teacher accused me of cheating and pulled my desk out. Now, I'm the only African-American child in the class, and probably one of three in the whole school. And she pulled my desk out, and she turned it and faced the rest of the class. And she gave the paper and told me, "You cheated," in front of everyone, and said, "Do it again," and went on to teach the class. And so I'm thinking, I could still see her face. I could still feel, you know, as this little kid, it almost puts me back in a little kid, like a child. And I took the test. I got a 100 again. She looked at it. She took it. She threw it and she gave me another test and said, do it again. So now I'm thinking, I am about to either crumble, but I'm going to get this right, you know? So I got a 100 again. And then she was like, she didn't apologize. She didn't, I mean, there was no nurturing there. And that, from that point on, I remember having difficulty really wanting to even, you know, dive into math. I struggled in math for a long time after that. I'd say my second incident would have been in high school. And I was president of the Black Student Union and directing the gospel choir. And one of the goals that I believed in firmly was to unite people. And so I talked to the different leaders of some of the different clubs. And I went to Lane Tech High School, Lane Tech in Chicago, and very extremely diverse, but then the principles it was established upon was systemically racist, unfortunately, because it was an all-boys school that was only, allowing white males at one time, and then they allowed males, and one of my cousins was one of the first to come there, and then females, and then, you know, African-American females and stuff like that. So anyway, I ran into a lot of problems with the administration of the school because of my stance on, you know, a lot of the Black boys were being, and Hispanic boys at the same time were being penalized for things that other students weren't being suspended for, you know, and I brought that to their attention as well as other things. And anyway, to discredit me, which was crazy because this is on a level of as if I was like important or something. They demoted me my senior year. And it was probably one of the hardest things to have to deal with. They claimed that a credit for summer school from a class, which I took, that I didn't fail, but I took the class because I knew that I'd probably get a teacher that I'd have some difficulty with in senior year. So anyway, I didn't want to deal with that. Because all of the politics, they demoted me. And what they did was when they demoted you, they put your name, they plaster your name down by the main hall, the office, and they list everyone who's been demoted. Now this is my senior year.
Oh my gosh.
Second semester, they demoted me and they plastered my name in front of a bunch of other people all over. And of course, it spread across, you know, there are 5,000 students at Lane. It's spread across everyone, and they're just like, well, Samyra, she's not, you know, really, you know, about being, you know, responsible. She's not really one to fight for the cause of, you know, equality. I mean, look, she's not a credible source. She's not even graduating. And so for several months, I would fight with them and they said, well, the credit is in the computer, but the grade is not there, so we can't put you back into your senior division. Finally, like maybe a month before graduation, they moved me up because they couldn't hold me because I had the credit there. The grade was an A. Yeah. But unfortunately, I wasn't listed with my graduates, with the other graduates in the program. I didn't receive my diploma until a year later. But the good thing about it was, because this was the first year that the gospel choir got to perform, and I was the director, and so my name was in the program. So that whole time there was a struggle because I had art teachers that would take my art and fold them in half and staple them. I don't know if I've ever shared that story with you when you were a student at Vallejo. No. I had art teachers that took my art and stapled them, fold them and stapled them. I had a music teacher put me out of the class for singing in chorus because I wouldn't sing alto, and he wanted to move me from soprano. And historically, African-American women weren't allowed to sing soprano. And so that was the basis behind it. The whole Marian Anderson and all of this other stuff. So it was racially motivated, and he gave me an F in chorus. And at the same time, I was singing first soprano at Orchestra Hall with All City for years. I had been doing that ever since third grade. So that was it was a great time, but it was a very trying time for me, high school, because there were a lot of different things that I had to combat that really targeted my gifts, you know, the things that I'm good at, you know. But the great thing that came out of it for me, even with the third grade teacher, she was one of the reasons why I wanted to become a teacher, because I didn't want any other child to ever experience anything like that. And I share that story with my third grade students. Yeah, I shared it with them this year. I share it with all of my students every year. How one teacher, you know, could try to just destroy a child. And, you know, we see it all the time in our school systems, but it's very common. So yeah, those would be the times that stick out the most, probably as a child, which might, you know, which is kind of sad when you think about it. As an adult, I just had thicker skin.
Wow. I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, I see it all over the place. And unfortunately, it's taken me such a long time to wake up to the fact that there are horrible mindsets out there. For a teacher to do something like that to a child, or for a human being to do that to another human being, it's just astronomically horrible, in my opinion, and should not be. And that just, as a child, that just sticks with you. And that person can, you know, unfortunately treat other people like that and goes their whole life inflicting that kind of pain on someone due to whatever is wrong with their way of thinking and their ignorance. And which leads me to my next question. So what are some examples of ignorance that you've had to deal with, whether that's in the last few weeks or at any point in your life, or even something that your kids have had to bring to your attention because someone or a group of people were ignorant?
Well, one of the things I was told this past week was that racism doesn't exist.
Oh.
And
Okay.
this individual who actually is, you know, I feel like somebody who's in church and should know better, went on to say that the problems in the Black and Brown communities have a whole lot to do with crime, welfare, lack of fathers. And I just I couldn't. Basically, what this individual outlined was symptoms and not the deeper issue, which the root is racist, right? So that was probably one of the the most ignorant things I have heard in a long time, that it doesn't exist. And they went on to say, basically, when you talk about it, you give it power. And I'm like, no, you have to identify the root in order to deal with it. You can't ignore it. It's just like a doctor coming in with a diagnosis. Regardless of what you believe, you need to identify what it is. And okay, well, this is the problem. And if it's something you've never heard about, you're going to do what? You're going to Google it. You're going to try to find out more information about it. And then you will know how to combat it, whether that's by your faith, speaking to it, believing, eating healthy, changing your diet. You're going to proactively, you're going to pursue a cure. You're going to solve this problem. And so for that individual to say that to talk about it gives it power, and that when you talk about race, you're promoting hate, I was like, no, it's not promoting hate. We need to deal with racism. You know, there's one race, human race. And the more that we talk about that, the more that we dive into that from that perspective, we allow people to see each other's value, worth. Yes, we're from different ethnic backgrounds. We have so much to bring to the table. We have so much to offer this society. We need to learn from each other. We need to glean from each other. We need to just celebrate each other, and what will strengthen us as a society. But to ignore it is just saying, well, you know, I mean, my leg is, I've got this disease, and I'm just gonna, you know, it really isn't there. It's just not there. And eventually that thing will kill you because you can't ignore it. You're going to have to face it head on.
Yeah, people tend to sweep these issues under the rug at times, actually a lot. I feel like people will talk about the issue and then think they've solved it and then they can move on from it. But this has been going on for so long. And to be able to have the one conversation that is uncomfortable, right? And then say, okay, we're done with that. Let's sweep that under the rug. Everything's solved. I'm in a bubble too, and I'm so appreciative to be learning about this, but it's incredible that it can be so highly ignored and easily ignored after they're like, okay, I had that uncomfortable conversation. Now we can move on with our lives. It's not like that.
No, it's definitely not just a one-time conversation. This is something that, it's a lifestyle. It's got to be pursued forever until there's resolution that is not just a resolution, but a real change that brings about real peace and real equality. And like you were saying, the humanity, until humanity is truly recognized. There's been a lot of information and a lot of things being talked about the last few weeks, especially. One of those topics is, the term anti-racist. No, I'm anti-racist. And one of the best things I read was, being anti-racist is a verb, and kind of like what we've just been talking about. You must have action behind what you're saying or what you're doing to truly be anti-racist, for it to really count. So how can people truly be anti-racist while simultaneously educating or having those uncomfortable conversations with family, friends, or relatives, or other coworkers? How can people put that action behind what they're saying? Because it's not a sprint. This is a marathon.
I think the first thing everyone needs to understand is that it will not be accomplished without your voice. Society as a whole has been conditioned to think out of sight, out of mind. So as with Trayvon Martin, as with Tamir Rice, as with Eric Garner, as soon as it dies down, Ahmaud Arbery, out of sight, out of mind. The other thing is also that if it's not happening to your community, it's not happening. So a lot of times we don't know what's going on because our world is so closed off from everyone else. And so we don't see it. It's not directly affecting us. We don't see the negative effects in our generations because it's not affecting us, right? So that's the first thing. We've got to understand that just because it's not happening in your particular community does not mean it's not happening. And so many times people invalidate what other people are experiencing because, well, that can't be. I mean, they must have done something wrong for the police to just shoot them unarmed. I mean, I've heard people say that. Oh, I have to hear more. There's more to the story. Well, okay, no, there's not. There's not, So the other thing is we need to understand that the media will vilify the oppressed. It is what is considered anti-Blackness or whatever. And we've seen it as early as when we were young, where the villain is all in Black, or it's a Black lie versus a white lie, things like that. We have to be conscious of those types of, subliminal messages that have infiltrated our culture completely. Yes, I mean, our culture is built on it. Black and brown communities have to understand that we have been born into this sin of racism, and it is affecting us. It's affecting our generation. Likewise, white communities need to understand that the effects of racism are different in your lives and where you may have benefited from it. Not knowingly,
right?
Not on purpose, but it's there, right? But the main thing is that unless we do something, it will infect us all, regardless of where we are, regardless of what side of it we're on. And there's no time to be complacent, right? You are or you're not. The other thing is there are a plethora of books and, how to be an anti-racist, white fragility, documentaries. 13th by Ava DuVernay is a great one because it outlines the kind of the judicial system and privatized prisons, and you see kind of this is a business, and this business needs bodies. One of the things I experienced doing prison ministry was seeing a lot of people who claim to be innocent. And a lot of folks, whenever they would say that, oh, they're just saying that to you, they're innocent. And I'm like, I don't think that everyone is saying just they're saying they're innocent and they're guilty. They're innocent. There are a lot of innocent people that were in jail. And I've witnessed personally, firsthand, someone trying to beat a confession out of my own father, or someone trying to plant drugs on my husband prior to us being married. These are people that I know. These are stories that I know. These are people that I love and care about, knowing that they were innocent. So, one of those things is we've got to change this judicial system. But the biggest thing is education. Educate yourselves, not just on how to be an anti-racist or how, but educate yourselves on, going back to what I was talking about, is George Washington Carver the only Black inventor you know? Because if that's the case, then you have been miseducated just as well as we have, right? And if you continue to allow yourselves to be that way, then you will not see the humanity in others and their value, right? And so we've got to get involved. And then also I would suggest people read books from the Black experience to see it from a different perspective, because that's eye-opening. It's one thing to kind of live in your own bubble, but then to see it from somebody else's perspective, you're like, wow, I never knew that was happening to you. I mean, my sisters and brothers, we have lived in the same house, and we sat down and had a conversation. And my sister said to me, you went to gifted schools and you were bussed out of the community, and mom and dad treated you better than they treated me, or whatever. This was basically kind of the gist of it. And I was like, well, you got to stay in the African-American community and you were supported and your teachers loved you. And we looked at each other and we saw the hurt that both of us had experienced. And the perspective was different because of our vantage point, right? Where we were. And I was like, well, I had to fight my whole time in school. She's like, I never knew you had to fight like that. I never knew your teachers treated you that way. I never knew. I was like, because when I would come home, this was my refuge. This was my place of me just being able to relax, but then also being, treated differently because, you sound white, or or when I go to school, why do you sound like this? So all of those different things, just, I guess, understanding from a different experience is a great way to start, to being anti-racist. And the thing is, either you are or you're not. There's no this good and bad binary, and it's hard to say, because it's just like as a sinner, either you're a sinner or you're saved. And sometimes those conversations are hard for people to hear, and it's hard for people to, because even the African Americans will, well, this happened to us, this happened. Okay, yes, it did. We need to identify the root of it, and it's going to take other people hearing what we're saying, like you guys giving me an opportunity to share, and you all lifting your voices, because unfortunately, people have been crying for years and others have not, because we have disconnected truth with what is our reality. If it's not our reality, then it can't be true, right? Absolutely. And so we have to look beyond that. Well, just because it's not happening to me doesn't mean it didn't happen to you, right? So
you posted something, I think it was a couple weeks ago, that was powerful, and you referenced how certain countries, how have they been able to move on from some of the atrocities they've caused their own people, like Germany, for example. And you had mentioned, you know, they acknowledged those, they dealt with the root and moved on. In the case of America, what does that mean for America? How does that look like? You know, how can we as human citizens, or really as individuals, do that? We can't really wait for the government to step up. It's got to start with us as people, as individuals, as humans. How can we start to do that?
Well, there's a lot with that, because it goes back to reparations that have never been kind of established for African Americans and the descendants of slaves. That was the difference between Germany and even South Africa, you know, repairing that breach that was destroyed. And everyone knows that economics has a lot to do with, you know, how the African American or Black and brown communities are faring right now. And economically, we were at a huge disadvantage for 400 years. And so never ever having those reparations have put us at a disadvantage, and everything is a struggle. And so with that, just referencing, you know, that slave owners received $300 for every freed slave. You know, I mean, it was a deal that Lincoln's administration worked out. And I mean, prominent abolitionists like William Lloyd Garrison, he was adamant against giving reparations to slave owners, because he's like, they have benefited for years off the backs of these other human beings. And to give them reparations is a slap in the face to the other human beings, right? So then there's this guy, William Sherman, who came up with the 40 acres and a mule. I don't know if you've ever heard of that saying, 40 acres and a mule. That was something that slaves were supposed to be given, right? It was an order number 15. Slaves were supposed to be given a 40 acres and a mule. And what was going to happen was, like, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, there was this land that was supposed to be given out, and it was going to establish economic wealth. William Sherman did discuss this with 20 other, I guess, Baptist preachers. I would have to double check that. Black Baptist preachers and some other white abolitionists. And they came up with this, and this was moving forward. They had established this order number 15, and it was a great thing. And Lincoln's successor, Johnson, and Andrew Johnson, reversed it and gave the land back to the slave owners. He was a Southern sympathizer. And so my thing is this, just to give a little bit of back history on that. We have people who, like Lincoln, and everyone's like, Lincoln, 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 and I'm not taking anything away from Lincoln. I come from the land of Lincoln. However, although he was considered a moderate anti-racist, either you are or you're not, and you have to take a stand. And even in the face of that, you've got, and this is where we are now. We can't be moderately anti-racist. We have to be anti-racist or racist, either or. Take your stance. We have to fight for truth and be outraged and move in directions to help promote change. One of the things that I feel that we're going to have to do as a people is protest divestment. What that is what they did in apartheid. We need to uncover these corporations that are promoting policies that are perpetuating this systemic racism. There are a lot of policies that are in our school systems, but then also our judicial system, but most importantly, these privatized prisons. We need to identify these corporations that have invested in these privatized prisons, because they are helping fill these beds, basically. We've got judges that are helping fill beds. We need to vote people like that out. We've got legislators who are helping fill beds. We need to vote them out. We need to do what we can as a people collectively, fervently, fighting against these policies that are incarcerating Black and brown people at unprecedented levels. That's a huge thing. And protest divestment is the language of economics. And it's only until we can affect the system economically that change will come. We can protest, we can have marches, we can vote even still, but economics is the language. Economics is what motivated slavery. Economics is what, you understand what I'm saying? Economics, unfortunately, with a lot of people in societies, is synonymous with power. And so that's the language. And so those are the ways that we can really invoke change, by protest divestment. One of the things that Brian Stevenson, the movie Just Mercy was based on him, the lawyer who had been, going against these death row convictions, unlawful death row convictions. He said states were required to keep prisons filled even if no one was committing a crime. In the late 80s and early 90s, this became a growth industry, unlike few growth industries in America's history. So we have to understand that this is about money. And the narrative wants everybody else to believe that Black and brown communities are doing this to themselves, that this is their fault, basically. And like I said, yes, we were all sinners. However, it is manifesting differently in our lives versus other people's lives. The sin of racism is manifesting differently in our lives versus that of our Caucasian brothers and sisters, right? It is manifesting differently. So we have to deal with that industry and tackle that, right? Going back to the me doing prison ministry, I remember this one guy who said I was innocent. I'm innocent, and I believed them. Anybody who told me they were innocent, I was gonna pray for them. And we prayed, and we believed that DNA evidence would exonerate him. I'd say maybe a month later, he was exonerated by DNA evidence. And that, first of all, confirmed that I have the power to speak things, into existence as well, and to touch and agree, but also that this is a faulty system. It's unfair. And some people are being sucked into it because they can't pay for a lawyer, or people are trying to get them to accept this charge because they're just going to find somebody to say they closed the case, right? So that's a huge thing. But we've got to cut ties with politicians or lawmakers or our favorite aldermen or whomever it is that are, supporting these policies. We've got to demand, either cut ties with them or demand that they do the right thing, right? We've got to call them on it. We have to call people. We have to force people to be accountable, because if we don't, and this is largely on the burden, I sense, on white America, because if your voices will be heard. This is an impossible task for just Black and brown communities. There's no way we're going to be able to do this unless we're doing it together. Absolutely not. We have to. The difference between, just like, we had protesters a couple of months ago, armed protesters storming because they were protesting because their right to not wear a mask or go get a haircut. They were not met with the same force as other people who were protesting who were not armed, right? So this is something that we have to clearly see and say, this is wrong, right? Why is it different? Why are these rules different? And so we really have to focus on that. And one of the other things I would say is vote for people who are like-minded, in the sense of who are going to support this cause. But not just vote, go and talk to the people who are in office already. Just because somebody doesn't agree with you does not mean that, some people just are ill-informed. Some people just don't know. We have to hold people accountable so that they can, we all take responsibility. and then all hopefully get born again out of this sin of racism, right? And that's the only way that we're going to be able to do it, and is together. There's no way we can do this separately.
Yeah.
It's not a Black cause. It's not a white cause. It's an American cause. This is a human cause. This is, you know, and you're seeing it across the world, around the world. This is a human cause, and we have got to deal with this, this original sin that we have been born in, and acknowledge that it's present, and however it functions and flows in our lives, acknowledge that, and just get delivered from it, you know.
This has been so powerful, so honest and raw. This is so authentic and absolutely eye-opening for me. From today, everyone who will be watching this, please take those action steps, speak out, hold people accountable, talk to those people who are in office already, be that voice for change, and vote, protest divestment. Do as much as you can. We're, as Samyra said, but this is a human cause. We're all in this together, and we've got to be together and present for things to change. Samyra, thank you so much for being so honest and open with us and having this discussion and being willing to talk with us about this. This is amazing and eye-opening, and really people need to hear this. You know, your voice needs to be heard. What you've had to say, I really wish could be shouted from everywhere. This is so good, so key. We're very humbled and so thankful to have you on this channel with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's absolutely been my pleasure.